Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Buying stocks is not the same as it was a couple of years ago. And the reason for that is because over the past couple of years, we've had a global pandemic that has fundamentally changed the way we think about the world, the way we think about technology, the way we think about work. It has fundamentally changed how the federal government thinks about putting money into the system, and it's resulted in a lot of inflation and supply chain issues. Now the federal government is getting out all that $7 trillion of liquidity they put into the system. Things have changed. And for a lot of reasons, it is interesting to think about how buying stocks a couple of years ago meant you were buying stock in a company and you were assuming the company was going to be able to grow. Well, now you can't just buy stock in a company. You have to factor in inflation, supply chains, geopolitical crises like a literal war going on. The fact that Starbucks literally just left Russia this morning, 130 locations closed. They're going to pay their workers for the next 6 months. So they're going to take care of their workers, all 2,000 of those Russian employees for at least the next 6 months, which is a good thing. But the entire world is changing, and now buying stocks of companies are a bit different than it was buying before. I saw a video today on CNBC by Mohammed El Arin, really amazing analyst, and is able to really break this stuff down. And I thought the analysis he gave on why the market sell-off does not concern the Fed, primarily because the Fed has other things they're worried about instead of stocks going down, even though you would think that's their concern, but that's not their concern because this is a market that is fundamentally different than it was many years ago. And we're going to look at his analysis and analyze it as he's talking.
Guest says the market sell-off could be entering a new phase. For more on what he means by that, let's bring in Mohammed El Arian. He's chief economic advisor at Allianz and the president of Queen's College at Cambridge University. Mohammed, when you say a new phase, is this a good new phase or a bad new phase?
No, it's a worrisome new phase. Becky, the big question for me is why haven't we had more of a bounce in what has been a relentless period of 7 to 8 weeks of weekly declines? And I think the answer is because we continue to get bad news.
So that makes a lot of sense, right? If we're going to get more bad news, the bounce that we should have, this like rebound off of really low lows, which happens in the stock market historically, it's not going to happen if you keep factoring in more bad news. I mean, even inflation, it went down only to 8.3% from 8.5% in the month of May. We thought it would be 8.1%. So it's like just more and more catalysts that aren't positive for the stock market.
On Friday 10 days ago, we had a wonderful bounce. Then comes the new week. Then comes Walmart. Then comes Target. And suddenly we have legitimate concerns about growth and earnings. So we need to get these worries out of the way before we can establish a good bottom and get a sustainable bounce.
Looking at statistics, looking at the numbers, the Dow did something last week that it hasn't done in almost 100 years. It's been 99 years since the Dow ended down for 8 weeks in a row. Maybe that goes to your point, just the idea that this has been a slow and painful process. Steady, and so people say that doesn't concern the Fed. This is still orderly at this point, but it is steep and it is painful and it is consistent.
It is. And even if it were to concern the Fed, and it doesn't concern the Fed because market functioning has been fine, and that's really the silver lining.
So again, right there, he says market functioning has been fine. It's not like the world has collapsed. In 2020, when the pandemic happened, literally the world was collapsing, so the Fed had to come in and save. The world's not collapsing. These companies are growing. These companies have profits. They have revenues. It's just like their stock prices and their valuations aren't rich. And I think the market's like actually, the Fed is like, that's kind of healthy at this point.
But even if it were to concern the Fed is highly constrained.
Constrained meaning they can't do anything. In 2008, they saved a little bit. 2020, they saved a lot, not even a little bit. They can't save anymore. They've done that, and it resulted in inflation. So they've got to let this thing happen.
The inflation isn't going to go away anytime soon. And the Fed just can't go back to its old habit of being there, of having a Fed put, of injecting liquidity. What we see now is that the Fed is constrained. And also, the Fed must keep an eye on the fact that the 60-40 portfolios have done really badly. And that's because the safe haven characteristics of government bonds were totally distorted by Fed intervention. So I don't think the Fed steps in anytime soon.
Hey, Mohammed, I'd love to get your views on this. I was at a dinner last night where there was a great debate among two very well-known CEOs, one of whom thought this was an 18-month, at worst, scenario. Another had a view that this was actually going to be a 3 to 4 year, if not more prolonged situation, and actually that the equity market was actually not going to really flush out till 2024 based on the fact that he believed earnings were going to continue to decline, and because we haven't really seen that in a truly meaningful way. Which side of that debate here in Davos would you take?
Yeah, but if you're sitting in the real economy, you're not just worried about inflation, profit margins, and growth. You are seeing a global economy that's being rewired by government and geopolitical issues.
And this is the stuff I was talking about in the beginning. It's not just about stocks and inflation and markets and prices. It's really about the different things we have in our current world that make buying stocks and buying companies fundamentally different.
Rewired by your own desire to build in resilience. Forget about the just in time. You now have to have a lot more resilience built in. So when you look at that outlook, both externally and internally, you'll find that people in the real economy are even more negative than people in the financial sector. And that's what I think you're picking up at that dinner when people say, is it 18 months or is it longer? It's the structure of the global economy that they are operating in is uncertain and is certainly changing.
But
Mohammed,
does that mean that you're taking the side of the longer?
Yeah, I think we've entered a period where multinationals in particular are going to have to rethink about how they approach a global economy. This is no longer a world of ever deeper trade and financial integration. This is a world where you're going to get fragmentation because of the geopolitics and because of your own decisions to increase resilience. So I do see an uncertain period for CEOs that operate globally. Not so if you operate nationally. The US outlook is much better than the rest of the world.
This is so interesting, right? Because the point he's making here is like globalization, the idea that we have a fully integrated economy and everything's okay and everyone loves each other and it's just all amazing and we're all going to work together. That's not necessarily going to be the case over the long haul, particularly because of these geopolitical issues. Like, think of all the companies that have had to leave Russia simply because, again, Starbucks left Russia, China left Russia, Pepsi left Russia, Netflix left Russia. A lot of those companies aren't even allowed to operate in China. Like, there's no Google in China. So, like, there are so many different things going on in the geopolitical landscape that if you're a multinational corporation, a corporation that actually has the ability to extend your influence and your reach around the world, meaning you are a multi-$100 billion company, it is changing. The dynamics of things are changing. I mean, what happens when Facebook reports earnings and they lose a couple 100 million people from Russia because Russia doesn't, they're not in Russia anymore? Like, that's just not good for Facebook. That's not good for growth. That's not good for earnings. All of these things fundamentally change. So the point Mohammed is making is that if you're a national company, you have to deal with national politics, you're going to be able to weather that storm. If you're a global company and you have to deal with all these governments around the world, dealing with all their different regulations and all their different criteria and all their different geopolitical risks, that's a different issue. Along with the fact that Palantir, one of the companies that I cover very deeply, they never worked in Russia and China. They exclusively decided that Russia and China would not be the adversaries that they want to engage with. So they're navigating this process in a little bit of a different way as well. They never worked with those countries, but a lot of the companies in those countries actually need their help for supply chain and logistics. And Ukraine and Russia's situation from a governmental body, we know that Palantir is working with those governments. So there are such new nuances to understanding the global integration of supply chains, logistics, finances, marketing, like just the ability for all these business concepts to come together to make a company function in this new world order that we are in. And quite frankly, it is fascinating for me to think over the next 5 years, how are stocks and equities going to perform against that? Because if you think about a stock and it's like able to just grow as a result of being part of this global economy and it has access to all these resources, once that shuts off, once you don't have access to this oil and gas because Russia doesn't want you to have that oil and gas, or once the ability for you to do marketing in this company is wrong, is incorrect because now the free speech laws in those countries inhibit you to have certain types of commercials, things change very, very quickly, and buying stocks is not going to be this. I mean, imagine if China comes out tomorrow and says, we don't like Tesla anymore. We want a state-controlled electric vehicle company. That's why Elon Musk doesn't say that many bad things about Tesla, because you really need Tesla to grow in China for Tesla to really fill into his valuation and to get even bigger. So very, very interesting to see what's going to be happening. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let me know what you thought about Mohammed and his thoughts about how this global economy is becoming a little bit more fragmented and how that's going to change the way we think of buying equities and buying stocks, given the geopolitical and macroeconomic issues that we have and the fact that the Fed is not going to be able to save us. Thank you guys so much for watching. Looking forward to your thoughts and comments. I will see you in the next one.